The sound of a $5,000 bottle of vintage Chateau Margaux hitting a marble floor doesn't sound like luxury. It sounds like a gunshot. On a rainy Tuesday in November, inside Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, that sound signaled the end of a life for two people. One was Nico Vitti, the volatile, broken heir to the city's most dangerous crime family. The other was a woman nobody noticed until she walked toward the danger instead of running away from it. This isn't a fairy tale about a bad boy and a good girl. This is the true, brutal story of how a single silent act of kindness started a war that nearly burned New York to the ground. This is the story of the Gilded Cage. The establishment was called Le Miroir. Located on East 57th Street, it was the kind of place where the menu didn't list prices, and the lighting was designed to make billionaires look 10 years younger. It was 8:15 p.m. when the doors swung open. The heavy oak slammed against the wall with a violence that silenced the jazz quartet in the corner. Nico Vitti walked in. At 27, Nico didn't just look like trouble. He looked like a natural disaster waiting for a coastline. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than the average car, but his tie was loosened, his hair was disheveled, and his eyes were bloodshot pools of dark fury. He was the only son of Salvatore Vitti, the don of the Vitti crime syndicate, which currently held a stranglehold on the shipping docks of New Jersey and the construction unions of Midtown. But tonight, Nico wasn't a prince. He was a wounded animal. Earlier that evening, in a dimly lit office in Little Italy, Salvatore had looked his son in the eye and told him he was being passed over. The family business, Nico's birthright, was being handed to a capo named Cassian Cole. Salvatore had called Nico too emotional. He had called him weak. Nico stormed past the maître d', a trembling man named Harrison Field, who knew better than to ask for a reservation. "Mr. Vitti," Harrison stammered, clutching a stack of menus like a shield. We weren't expecting you." Nico didn't speak. He walked straight into the main dining room. He grabbed the nearest table, table 4, occupied by a terrified tech CEO and his mistress, and flipped it. The sound was deafening. Crystal shattered. Silverware clattered like shrapnel. The scream started a second later. "Get out!" Nico growled. His voice was a low rumble, terrifyingly calm compared to his actions. "Everyone, get out!" Pandemonium ensued. New York's elite scrambled for the exits, clutching their pearls and purses. Within 2 minutes, the restaurant was empty, save for the staff cowering near the kitchen doors, and Nico, breathing heavily, standing amidst a sea of broken porcelain and spilled red wine that looked disturbingly like blood on the white marble floor. Nico wasn't done. The rage in his chest was a physical pain. He grabbed a bottle of brandy from the service station and hurled it at the massive antique mirror behind the bar. Crash! The mirror exploded outward. A large shard of glass sliced across the back of Nico's right hand as he followed through with the throw. He didn't flinch. He just stood there, his chest heaving, staring at his fractured reflection in the remaining jagged pieces of the mirror. Blood began to drip from his hand, creating a steady pat-pat-pat on the floor. He felt dizzy. He felt entirely, hollowly alone. The staff had fled to the alleyway. The room was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator units and the dripping blood. Then, movement in his peripheral vision. Nico spun around, his good hand reaching for the gun tucked in his waistband. "I said get out!" But the figure didn't flinch. It was a waitress. She couldn't have been more than 24. She was small, with dark hair pulled back in a severe, messy bun, and a uniform that was slightly too big for her. Her name tag, crooked, read Tessa. She wasn't running. She wasn't crying. She was walking toward him. "Are you deaf?" Nico snapped. though the venom was leaking out of his voice, replaced by confusion. Tessa Calloway didn't speak. She held a clean white linen napkin in one hand and a glass of ice water in the other. She walked through the debris, her cheap black work shoes crunching on the glass that cost more than her rent. She stopped 2 feet in front of him. The heir to the Vitti Empire, a man who had killed before, loomed over her. Tessa set the water down on the only table still standing. Then she reached out. Nico flinched. He expected a slap, or maybe she was reaching for a weapon. Instead, her cool, rough fingers gently took his bleeding right hand. The contact sent a shockwave through him. Nobody touched Nico Vitti unless they wanted something or wanted to hurt him. This touch was different. It was clinical, yet tender. She inspected the gash. It was deep. Without a word, she began to wrap the linen napkin around his hand, pulling it tight enough to stem the flow of blood, but loose enough to not cause more pain. "I ruined your workplace," Nico whispered, his adrenaline crashing, leaving him exhausted. "Why are you helping me?" Tessa finished the knot. She looked up, and for the first time their eyes locked. Her eyes were a startling shade of grey, tired but intelligent. "Because you're bleeding," she said softly. Her voice was raspy, like she hadn't used it in days. "And because you look like you're in more pain than just the hand." She didn't wait for a response. She turned, picked up a tray from a nearby stand, and began clearing the broken glass from the floor, methodically, as if it were just another Tuesday night closing shift. Nico stood there, the white napkin turning red, watching her. For the first time in his life, the silence wasn't lonely. It was heavy with something else. Sirens wailed in the distance. The NYPD was coming. "Go out the back," Tessa said without looking up, sweeping shards into a dustpan. "The alley leads to 58th. You can lose them there." Nico hesitated. He wanted to ask her name, even though he'd read the tag. He wanted to give her money, but the sirens were close. He turned and ran toward the kitchen, but at the swing doors he looked back. Tessa was the only thing standing in the wreckage of Le Miroir, a lone figure trying to clean up a disaster she didn't create. 3 days later, the headline in the New York Post read, "Mob Tantrum, Vitti Hair Trashes Midtown Gem." Salvatore Vitti sat in his study, the newspaper spread out on his mahogany desk. The room smelled of cigar smoke and lemon polish. Nico stood by the window, his bandaged hand throbbing. "You are a child," Salvatore said, not shouting, which was worse. "Cassian Cole is out there securing routes in Newark, and you are making the front page for breaking plates like an angry toddler." "I handled the police," Nico said, his voice tight. "The owner, Harrison, won't press charges. I paid him triple the damages." "It's not about the money, Nico." Salvatore slammed his fist on the desk. "It's about respect, fear. Who fears a man who loses control? You are a liability." Nico clenched his jaw. He left the study before he did something that would get him killed by his own father. He got into his black Audi R8 and drove. He didn't have a destination in mind, but his subconscious did. He found himself parking a block away from Le Miroir. The windows were boarded up with plywood. A closed for renovation sign was taped to the door. Nico felt a pang of guilt that was foreign to him. He pulled out his phone and dialed his fixer, a man named Samuel. "Samuel, the staff from the restaurant. What happened to them?" "Harrison fired everyone." Samuel's voice crackled over the speaker. "Said he couldn't afford payroll while they rebuild. Insurance is stalling because it was a criminal act by a known associate." "Find the girl," Nico said. "Which girl? There were 3 hostesses and the waitress, Tessa. Find her. Now." It took Samuel 2 hours. Tessa Calloway lived in Queens, in a neighborhood called Astoria, but not the trendy part. She lived in a walk-up on a street lined with auto body shops and flickering streetlights. It was raining again when Nico climbed the 4 flights of stairs. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and damp carpet. He knocked on door 4B. He heard shuffling, then the slide of a deadbolt. The door opened a crack, held by a chain. One grey eye peered out. It widened slightly. "You," she said. "Open the door, Tessa." She hesitated, then closed it to undo the chain. When it opened fully, Nico saw the reality of her life. The apartment was tiny, barely a studio. There was a mattress on the floor, a stack of textbooks on a crate, and a pile of unopened envelopes on the counter marked "Final Notice." But what caught his attention was the man sitting in the wheelchair by the window. He looked like a skeleton, pale and shivering, watching a static-filled TV. "Who is that?" Nico asked, stepping inside uninvited. "My brother," Tessa said, moving to block his view, protective instinct flaring. "He's sick. What do you want? You cost me my job, Mr. Vitti. I don't have anything worth stealing." Nico looked at her. She was wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, looking even smaller than she had in the restaurant. Yet she stood between him and her brother, like a lioness. "I know I got you fired," Nico said stiffly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "This is for the damages." He held it out. Tessa looked at the envelope, then at his face. "I don't want your money," she said. Nico blinked. "There is $10,000 in there. Take it." "I said no." Her voice was firm. "My brother Leo, he used to run packages for people like you. That's why he's in that chair. A deal went bad, and they broke his spine. I don't touch Mafia money. It's cursed." Nico felt a cold chill. He looked at Leo, the shivering man in the chair. This was the collateral damage of his world. "You have eviction notices on the counter," Nico pointed out, his tone hardening to mask his shame. "Pride doesn't pay rent, Tessa." "It lets me sleep at night," she countered. "Please leave." Nico stared at her. He was used to people begging him for favors or cowering in fear. He wasn't used to someone with nothing refusing everything he had to offer. He placed the envelope on the small, wobbly kitchen table. "It's not Mafia money," he lied. "It's severance from the restaurant owner. I made him send it." Tessa narrowed her eyes. She knew he was lying, but her eyes flickered to her brother, who let out a soft moan of pain. She needed medicine. She needed heat. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you come here?" Nico looked at his hand, still bandaged in the linen she had tied. "Because you didn't run," he said. "And because I think I need you to do it again." "Do what?" "Stop me from bleeding." Tessa stared at him, confused. "I don't mean the hand," Nico said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet rumble. "My father is pushing me out. There is a war coming with the Cole family. I need someone who isn't on the payroll, someone who isn't afraid of broken glass." "I'm a waitress, not a soldier," Tessa said. "I don't need a soldier. I have plenty of those. I need a witness. I need someone real." Nico took a step closer. "Come work for me. Personal staff. You manage my apartment, my schedule. You keep me grounded. I'll pay for your brother's medical bills, all of them. Top specialists." Tessa looked at Leo. She looked at the envelope. She looked at Nico Vitti, the monster who had destroyed a restaurant because he was having a bad day. But she also remembered the look in his eyes when he stood in the wreckage. He hadn't looked like a monster then. He looked like a boy who had been beaten until he broke. "Strictly business?" Tessa said, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't get involved in the illegal side. I don't carry packages. I don't see anything." "Strictly business?" Nico agreed. You're just the help. Tessa took a deep breath. Fine. But if you ever throw a bottle near me, I won't bandage you up. I'll let you bleed out. Nico's mouth twitched. It was almost a smile. Fair enough. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Be ready at 8 a.m. tomorrow. A car will pick you up. Nico walked back down the stairs, the smell of cabbage and damp carpet filling his nose. He felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. For the first time in years, Nico Vitti had something to look forward to. But he had no idea that by bringing Tessa Calloway into his world, he had just painted a target on her back and handed his enemies the one weapon that could destroy him. As he got into his car, his phone buzzed. A text from Cassian Cole. Heard you broke a nail at Le Miroir. Step aside, little prince. The adults are talking now. Nico crushed the phone in his hand. The war had begun. The elevator ride to the 45th floor of the Vitti Tower took exactly 30 seconds. But to Tessa, it felt like a descent into the underworld, even though she was going up. When the doors slid open, she wasn't greeted by a home. She was greeted by a mausoleum. Nico Vitti's penthouse was a sprawling expanse of black marble, chrome, and floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking Central Park. It was breathtakingly expensive and suffocatingly cold. There were no photos on the walls, no books on the shelves. It smelled of ozone and stale scotch. Your room is down the hall, second door on the left, Nico said, walking past her without looking back. He threw his keys onto a console table that cost more than Tessa's entire education. Kitchen is fully stocked. Do whatever you want with the place. Just don't talk to me before 10 a.m., and don't let anyone in unless Samuel clears them. Tessa stood in the foyer, her duffel bag heavy on her shoulder. What is my job exactly? You said, manage your life. That's vague. Nico stopped it. He turned slowly, his eyes dark and heavy with lack of sleep. Your job, Tessa, is to make sure that when I come home, I don't feel like putting a bullet in my brain. Can you handle that? It was a raw, brutal admission. Tessa tightened her grip on her bag. I'll start by opening the curtains. It looks like a vampire lives here. Nico snorted, a short, sharp sound that might have been a laugh. Maybe one does. For the next 2 weeks, a strange rhythm developed. Tessa was a ghost in the machine of Nico's life. She didn't just clean, she exorcised the apartment. She threw out the empty bottles that cluttered the study. She organized the chaotic piles of cash and legal documents scattered on the dining table. She bought plants, peace lilies and ferns, and placed them in the sunlight, forcing life into the sterile space. She also learned about Nico Vitti. She learned he barely slept. She heard him pacing the floors at 3 a.m., the heavy thud of his boots echoing like a heartbeat. She learned he had nightmares. Sometimes she heard him shout a name, Matteo. But she didn't know who that was. She also learned he was being hunted. It happened on a Tuesday. Tessa was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a stew. She refused to let him order takeout for the 10th night in a row, when the intercom buzzed. Mr. Vitti, Mr. Cole is on his way up, the concierge said, sounding terrified. Nico was in the shower. Tessa froze. Cassian Cole, the man Nico had mentioned, the rival. The elevator doors opened before she could warn him. Cassian Cole walked in like he owned the building. He was older than Nico, perhaps in his late 30s, with slicked back blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his predatory blue eyes. He was followed by 2 mountains of men in ill-fitting suits. "Nico!" Cassian called out, his voice booming. "Where is the prodigal son?" He stopped when he saw Tessa. He looked her up and down, a slow, insulting appraisal that made her skin crawl. Well, Cassian sneered, stepping into the kitchen. He picked up a slice of raw carrot from the cutting board and ate it. Nico has a new pet, A bit plain for a Vitty, isn't she? Usually, he likes them blonde and silicone. Tessa didn't back away. She gripped the chef's knife she was using. She didn't raise it, but she didn't put it down. "I'm the housekeeper," she said coldly, "and you're interrupting dinner." Cassian laughed. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and gunpowder. "You got a tongue on you. I like that. Tell me, sweetheart, does he pay you well? Or does he pay you in other ways?" He reached out to touch a loose strand of hair by her face. Click. The sound was distinct. It came from the hallway. Cassian froze. His hand hovered inches from Tessa's face. Nico stood in the doorway, a towel wrapped around his waist, water dripping from his chest. In his hand was a Sig Sauer P226, leveled directly at Cassian's forehead. "Touch her," Nico whispered, his voice dangerously soft. "And I will paint this kitchen with your brains, Cassian. I don't care what the commission says." The room went dead silent. The bodyguards reached for their jackets, but Cassian raised a hand to stop them. He stared at Nico, measuring the threat. He saw the shaking rage in Nico's hand, not fear, but the vibration of a man holding back an explosion. Cassian smiled, a tight, thin expression. He slowly lowered his hand away from Tessa. "Easy, little prince," Cassian said, backing away. "Just came to deliver a message from your father. The charity gala on Friday. You're expected to attend. And bring a date. He wants to show a united front." Cassian looked at Tessa one last time. His eyes narrowed, as if trying to place a memory. "See you there. Make sure the help cleans up after you." He turned and left, his men trailing behind him. As soon as the elevator doors closed, Nico sagged. He lowered the gun and leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, without opening his eyes. Tessa put the knife down. Her hands were trembling now. "I'm fine." "He won't come back here," Nico promised. "I'll double the security." "Who is Matteo?" Tessa asked. The question hung in the air. Nico's eyes snapped open. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a wall of ice. "Finish the stew, Tessa," he said, turning back to his room. "And get a dress. You're coming to the gala on Friday." "I'm the housekeeper," she argued. "Not on Friday," Nico said, shutting his bedroom door. "On Friday, you're my shield." The Vitty Foundation Gala was held at the Pierre Hotel. It was an event where the city's politicians, judges, and celebrities mingled with the criminals who bribed them, all under the guise of raising money for inner-city youth programs. Tessa felt like she was wearing a costume. The dress Nico had provided was a floor-length slip of emerald green silk that hugged every curve. A diamond necklace, cold and heavy, rested against her collarbone. Samuel, the fixer, had sent a hair and makeup team. When she stepped out of her room, Nico was waiting in the living room, nursing a bourbon. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like armor. He looked up, and for a moment the glass paused halfway to his mouth. "You look—" He struggled for the word. "Adequate." Tessa rolled her eyes. "You look like a penguin who kills people." "Shall we?" He offered his arm. The car ride was silent. Nico stared out the window, his jaw clenched. "Why me?" Tessa asked eventually. "You could have any model in the city." "Models talk," Nico said. "They tweet. They want to be seen. I need someone who notices things. You saw the glass coming before I threw it that night at the restaurant. You saw the pain before you saw the blood. I need that set of eyes tonight." "What am I looking for?" "Betrayal," Nico said simply. "It's going to be everywhere." The ballroom was a sea of diamonds and black ties. A string quartet played Mozart. Champagne flowed like water. As they entered, cameras flashed. Nico placed a hand on the small of Tessa's back. His touch was warm, possessive. It was an act, she knew, but it made her pulse jump. "Don't leave my side," he murmured in her ear. They moved through the crowd. Nico introduced her simply as Tessa, offering no last name, which only intrigued the socialites more. She played the part perfectly, silent, polite, observant. She saw the way the police commissioner shook hands with Salvatore Vitti. Too long, too friendly. She saw the way a judge slipped an envelope into his jacket pocket after talking to a capo. Then she saw Salvatore Vitti himself. The Don was holding court near the ice sculpture. He was a small man with eyes like polished stones. When Nico approached, the circle parted. "Father," Nico said, his voice void of emotion. "Nico." Salvatore didn't look at his son. He looked at Tessa. "And who is this?" "Tessa," Nico said. Salvatore hummed. "Pretty. Does she speak?" "When she has something intelligent to say," Tessa said before she could stop herself. Nico stiffened. The circle went quiet. Salvatore slowly turned his gaze to her. Then he laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Spirit. Good. You need spirit to survive, Nico. He drains the life out of everything else." The insult landed. Nico's grip on Tessa's waist tightened to the point of pain. "Enjoy the party," Salvatore said dismissively, turning his back on them to speak to a senator. Nico steered Tessa away, heading for the bar. He ordered a double scotch and downed it in one go. "He hates you," Tessa whispered. "He blames me," Nico corrected. "Matteo, he was my older brother, the perfect one, the heir. 10 years ago we were attacked, a drive-by. I ducked. Matteo didn't." Tessa felt a pang of sympathy. "It wasn't your fault. My father thinks I should have died instead." "Sometimes I agree with him." Nico set the glass down. "I need to talk to Samuel. Stay here. Do not move." He disappeared into the crowd. Tessa stood alone by the bar, watching the glittering lies around her. She felt exposed. "Champagne?" A voice came from her left. She turned. It was Cassian Cole. He looked distinct from the other thugs in suits. He looked like a shark in human skin. "No, thank you," Tessa said, looking for Nico. "He left you," Cassian said, stepping closer, blocking her view of the room. "That's what Vitti men do. They leave their women to clean up the mess, just like your father left you, right?" Tessa froze. "Excuse me?" Cassian swirled his wine. "I did a little digging after our meeting in the kitchen. Tessa Calloway, sister of Leo Calloway, formerly of the 112th Street crew." Tessa's heart hammered against her ribs. "Leave my brother out of this." "Leo was a good runner," Cassian mused. "Fast, smart, until he tried to skim off the top. That deal in the Bronx 3 years ago. The one where he fell off a loading dock." "It was an accident," Tessa said, her voice trembling. "The railing gave way." Cassian leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. "There was no railing, sweetheart, and it wasn't an accident. I was there." Tessa stopped breathing. The ballroom seemed to spin. "What?" "Salvatore ordered it," Cassian whispered, dropping the bomb with sadistic pleasure. "Leo was stealing. Salvatore told me to teach him a lesson. Break his legs," he said. I guess I got a little enthusiastic and broke his spine instead. He pulled back, smiling at the horror on her face. "You're working for the man who signed your brother's death warrant, Tessa. You're sleeping in the house of the family that put your brother in that chair. And Nico? He knows. He's always known what we do to skimmers." "You're lying," Tessa gasped. Tears pricked her eyes. "Ask him," Cassian challenged. "Ask your precious Nico about the Bronx shipment of 2021. Watch his face." Cassian patted her arm, mocking comfort. "You don't belong here, Tessa. You're just another victim pretending to be a guest. If I were you, I'd run before you end up like Leo." Cassian walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Tessa stood, paralyzed. The music, the laughter, the clinking glasses. It all became a roar of noise. The Viti family, Salvatore, Cassian, Nico. Had Nico known? She saw Nico emerging from the crowd, looking for her. He spotted her and started walking over, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips as he saw she was safe. But to Tessa, he no longer looked like a broken boy. He looked like a Viti. She didn't wait for him. She turned and ran. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the protests of the people she bumped into. She burst through the double doors, past the startled valet, and out into the cool New York night. "Tessa!" She heard Nico's voice behind her, but she didn't stop. She kicked off her high heels and ran barefoot down Fifth Avenue, the emerald silk dress flying behind her like a tattered flag. She had to get to Leo. She had to get out. She had been sleeping in the devil's bed. And now, the devil had woken up. Back at the hotel entrance, Nico stopped, watching her disappear around the corner. Samuel stepped up beside him. "Let her go, boss," Samuel asked. Nico's face was a mask of confusion and rising panic. She was crying. "Samuel, why was she crying?" "I don't know. But Cassian was talking to her just before you came back." Nico looked at where Cassian was standing by the valet stand, lighting a cigarette, watching Nico with a smug grin. Nico realized then that the war hadn't just started. He was already losing. "Get the car," Nico ordered, his voice terrifyingly calm. "We're going to Queens." "To the girl?" "No," Nico said. "To the brother. If Cassian spoke to her, he used the brother as leverage. I need to know what he said." Nico got into the car. He looked at his hand, where the scar from the mirror cut was still healing. The cut Tessa had bandaged. I didn't break him, Nico thought. But if Cassian told her about the business, she will never look at me the same way again. And the thought of Tessa looking at him with hatred terrified him more than any gun Cassian Cole could point at his head. Tessa didn't remember the cab ride to Queens. She didn't remember paying the driver. She only remembered the frantic pounding of her own heart as she fumbled with her keys at the door of apartment 4B. She burst inside. The apartment was dark, illuminated only by the flicker of the TV. Leo was asleep in his wheelchair, his head lolling to the side, a blanket draped over his useless legs. Seeing him there, broken, trapped in a life of pain because of the family she had just been sipping champagne with, shattered her. "Leo!" she choked out, shaking him awake. "Leo, wake up! We have to go!" Leo blinked, groggy and confused. "Tess, what time is it? Why are you wearing a ball gown?" "It doesn't matter," she said, her voice rising in panic. She ran to the bedroom and grabbed a duffel bag, throwing clothes in haphazardly. "We're leaving. Tonight. We're going to Aunt May's in Jersey." "Jersey?" "Tessa, slow down. What happened?" "I made a mistake," she sobbed, throwing his medication into the bag. "I trusted the wrong people. We aren't safe here." She rushed back to the living room to grab his coat. But as she reached for the wheelchair handles, the door behind her didn't just open, it was kicked in. The wood splintered with a sickening crack. Tessa screamed, spinning around, shielding Leo with her body. It wasn't a hitman, it was Nico. He stood in the doorway, chest heaving, his tuxedo jacket torn at the shoulder, rain dripping from his dark hair. He looked wild, dangerous. "Get out!" Tessa screamed, grabbing a heavy ceramic lamp from the table. "Get out of my house!" Nico didn't move. He held up his hands, palms open. "Tessa, put the lamp down. You can't leave. They're watching the bridges." "Who? Your father? Your psychopath friend? Cassian?" Tessa hurled the lamp. It smashed against the doorframe inches from Nico's head. He didn't flinch. "You knew!" she accused, her voice breaking into a wail. "You knew what your family did to him. You walked into this house, you looked my brother in the eye, and you gave me money like it was charity. It was blood money." Nico took a step forward, stepping on the ceramic shards. "I didn't know it was Leo," he said, his voice rough. "I knew about the Bronx job. I knew a runner got hurt. But I swear to you, Tessa, I didn't know it was your brother until tonight. It doesn't matter," she yelled. "You're a Vitti. It's all the same poison. You're all monsters." "Yes," Nico said. The admission stopped her. He looked at Leo, then back at her, his eyes filled with a haunting resignation. "We are monsters. My father ordered it. Cassian executed it. And I reaped the benefits of the profits. I am not innocent, Tessa. I never claimed to be." He walked closer, ignoring her flinch. "But I am not them," he said intensely. "I didn't come here to hurt you. I came here because Cassian isn't just trying to scare you. He's tying up loose ends." Tessa's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" "Cassian wants the throne," Nico said rapidly. "To get it, he needs to prove I'm weak, that I'm compromised. You are the weakness, Tessa. As long as you and Leo are alive, you're a liability to the family. Cassian told you the truth tonight, not to warn you, but to make you run, so his men could pick you up outside the city limits without witnesses." Tessa looked at Leo, who was pale and trembling, finally understanding the gravity of the situation. "So what do we do?" Leo asked, his voice small. "We go," Nico said, "but not to Jersey. You come with me." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Tessa spat. Nico grabbed her shoulders. His grip was firm, but not painful. He forced her to look at him. "Tessa, listen to me. I don't care if you hate me. You can hate me for the rest of your life. But I will not let you die because I was careless enough to bring you into my world. Please, let me save you." Tessa searched his face. She saw the fear there. Not fear for himself, but fear for her. In the grey depth of his eyes, she saw the same boy who had stood in the broken glass of the restaurant, bleeding and alone. She nodded, a single, jerky motion. "Good," Nico said. He turned to Leo. "Can you move your arms?" "Yeah," Leo said. "Grab the bag." Nico didn't wait. He scooped Leo up out of the wheelchair as if he weighed nothing. "Leave the chair. It won't fit in the car. We'll get a new one." They moved to the door, but before they could step into the hallway, the window in the living room exploded. Crash! A Molotov cocktail sailed through the shattering glass, landing on the old sofa. The cheap fabric ignited instantly. Flames roared up the wall, licking at the peeling paint. "Go!" Nico roared, shoving Tessa into the hallway. He followed, carrying Leo, as a second bottle smashed against the kitchen wall. The heat was instantaneous and blistering. They scrambled down the 4 flights of stairs, the sound of breaking glass and screaming neighbors echoing above them. They burst out onto the rainy street, just as a black SUV screeched around the corner, tires smoking. "The howdy!" Nico commanded, nodding toward his sports car parked illegally by a hydrant. "Get in." He deposited Leo into the passenger seat. The back seat of the R8 was too small for a grown man, and shoved Tessa into the cramped back. As Nico slid into the driver's seat, the window of the approaching SUV rolled down. An automatic weapon poked out. "Get down!" Nico yelled. He slammed the car into gear and floored it. The engine roared like a beast. Bullets pinged against the rear bumper, sparking in the dark. Nico spun the wheel, drifting around a corner, narrowly missing a parked delivery truck. He didn't look back at the burning building that had been Tessa's home. He just drove, his face a mask of stone, driving straight into the war he had tried so hard to avoid. The Audi R8 was fast, but New York City traffic was a great equalizer. Neko wove through the congestion on the Queensboro Bridge, using the shoulder, ignoring the blaring horns. "Where are we going?" Leo asked, gripping the dashboard handle with white knuckles. "The docks," Neko said, his eyes scanning the rearview mirror. "Brooklyn Navy Yard. I have a safe house there. Off the books. Even my father doesn't know about it." "Are they following us?" Tessa asked from the back, twisting around to look through the rear window. "Not yet," Neko said, "but they have scanners on the license plates. We have maybe 20 minutes before every corrupt cop on Cassian's payroll is looking for this car." Tessa looked at the back of Neko's head. He was bleeding again. A shard of glass from the apartment window must have grazed his neck. A thin line of blood trickled down into his tuxedo collar. "You're hurt," she said softly. "I'm fine." "Why are you doing this, Neko?" Leo asked. "You're the Don's son. Why save the help?" Neko met Leo's eyes for a split second before returning to the road. "Because I owe you. A debt is a debt." It was a Mafia answer. But Tessa knew it was a lie. He wasn't doing this for a debt. He was doing it because for the first time, he had found something worth protecting. They reached the Navy Yard just as the police scanners started chirping. Neko pulled the car behind a rusted corrugated metal warehouse hidden from the main road by stacks of shipping containers. "Out!" Neko ordered. "Quickly!" He helped Leo out of the car, carrying him again. They moved into the warehouse through a side door that Neko unlocked with a keypad. Inside, it was cold and dusty, smelling of diesel and salt water. But there was a generator, a cot, a medical kit, and a weapons locker. Neko set Leo down on the cot. He then went straight to the locker and pulled out a heavy assault rifle and 2 handguns. He checked the magazines with practiced efficiency. Tessa watched him. He had shed the tuxedo jacket. His white shirt was stained with soot and blood. He looked like a fallen angel preparing for Armageddon. "Do you know how to use a gun?" Neko asked Leo. "I used to run packages, not enforcement," Leo said, "but I can point and shoot." Neko handed him a Glock. "If anyone comes through that door who isn't me, you empty the clip. Do you understand?" Leo nodded, taking the gun with trembling hands. Neko turned to Tessa. "Stay here. Stay down." "Where are you going?" She grabbed his arm. "To finish this," Neko said. "Cassian won't stop hunting us. If we stay here, we die. I have to go to him." "That's suicide," Tessa cried. "He has an army." "He has mercenaries," Neko corrected. "Mercenaries fight for money. I'm going to fight for something else." He pulled his phone out. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. "Father," Neko said into the silence of the warehouse. Salvatore Vitti's voice filled the room, sounding bored. "I hear you're having a busy night, Neko. A fire in Queens? Very dramatic." "Cassian tried to kill me," Neko said, "and he burned down a civilian building to do it." "Cassian is ambitious," Salvatore said. "He says you've gone rogue, that you're protecting a rat's family." "I'm protecting my people," Neko snarled. "Something you forgot how to do a long time ago." There was a pause. "You have until dawn, Neko. If Cassian kills you, he takes the family. If you kill him, well, maybe I was wrong about you being weak." The line went dead. Tessa stared at the phone. "He's letting you kill each other? He's your father." "He's a businessman," Neko said, holstering his weapons. "He's hedging his bets." He turned to leave, but Tessa stepped in front of him. She reached up and touched the cut on his neck, her thumb brushing against his pulse. It was hammering. "Come back," she whispered. It was a plea and a forgiveness. Neko closed his eyes for a moment, leaning into her touch. "I promise." He kissed her forehead, a brief, burning contact. And then he was gone, slipping out into the night. Nico didn't go to Cassian's headquarters. He knew Cassian wouldn't be there. Cassian would be at the place where he felt most powerful. Le Miroir. The restaurant had been repaired since Nico's outburst, prepared for a grand reopening the next day. It was symbolic. Cassian wanted to take the thing Nico had broken and claim it as his own. Nico parked the Audi a block away. He walked through the rain, the assault rifle hidden under a long trench coat he'd grabbed from the safe house. The front doors were locked, but the lights were on inside. Nico went to the alley, the same alley Tessa had told him to use to escape weeks ago. He kicked open the service door. The kitchen was empty. He moved silently through the stainless steel maze, the smell of sanitizer stinging his nose. He pushed open the swing doors to the dining room. Cassian was there. He was sitting at table 4, the table Nico had flipped. He was eating a steak, alone. 4 armed men stood in the shadows of the room. "I knew you'd come," Cassian said, not looking up from his meal. "You're predictable, Nico. Emotional." Nico stepped into the light. He didn't raise his rifle yet. "You burned down an apartment building, Cassian. There were families in there." "Collateral damage," Cassian shrugged, like the girl's brother. "It's the cost of doing business." "No," Nico said, his voice echoing in the empty, luxurious room. "It's the cost of being a butcher without a conscience." "And you have a conscience now?" Cassian laughed, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Because you're sleeping with the waitress? Don't make me laugh. You're a vitty. You're rot, just like the rest of us." "I was," Nico admitted. "But she fixed me." Cassian's eyes narrowed. He signaled to his men. "Kill him!" The men raised their weapons. Nico didn't dodge. He didn't run. He did the one thing Cassian didn't expect. He shot the chandelier. Nico raised the rifle and fired a burst into the chain holding the massive 2-ton crystal fixture above the center of the room. Crack! The chain snapped. The chandelier fell with the force of a bomb. It crashed into the floor between Nico and the gunman, exploding into a cloud of crystal shrapnel and dust. In the chaos, Nico moved. He dove behind the marble bar as bullets chewed up the wood where he had been standing. He popped up, firing 2 controlled shots. The gunman on the left went down. He rolled to the right, using the reflection in the new mirror, the replacement for the one he had broken, to spot the second man. He spun and fired. The second man fell. "Coward!" Cassian screamed, flipping his table for cover. He pulled a gold-plated Desert Eagle and started firing blindly at the bar. Nico waited. He counted the shots. 1, 2, 3, 7. Click. Cassian was empty. Nico vaulted over the bar. The remaining 2 bodyguards hesitated, seeing the rage on his face. "Leave!" Nico roared, "or die for a dead man." The bodyguards looked at Cassian, then at Nico's rifle. They dropped their guns and ran for the exit. It was just Nico and Cassian. Cassian fumbled to reload, but Nico was on him. He kicked the gun out of Cassian's hand. He grabbed Cassian by the lapels of his expensive suit and slammed him into the wall. "You wanted the crown," Nico growled, pressing the barrel of the rifle under Cassian's chin. "Here it is." "Do it!" Cassian spat, blood on his teeth. "Kill me! Prove you're your father's son!" Nico's finger tightened on the trigger. He wanted to. Every instinct in his blood screamed for it. But then he remembered the apartment in Queens. He remembered Tessa standing between him and her brother. He remembered the feeling of the linen napkin on his hand. If I kill him, I become the monster she thinks I am. Nico pulled the rifle away. Cassian blinked, confused. "You're weak." "No," Nico said. "I'm done." He swung the butt of the rifle, smashing it into Cassian's temple. Cassian crumpled to the floor, unconscious, but alive. Nico stood over him, breathing hard. The silence returned to Le Miroir. His phone buzzed. It was Samuel. "The police are 2 minutes out, boss. And your father. He just had a heart attack. The stress of the night. He's in the ICU." Nico looked at the unconscious body of his rival. He looked at the ruin of the restaurant. "Let the police have Cassian," Nico said. "Give them the evidence on the Bronx shipment. Pin it all on him." "And you?" Samuel asked. "Where are you going? The family needs a Don." Nico walked toward the exit, stepping over the broken crystals that looked like diamonds in the dim light. "The family is dead, Samuel. Burn the files. I'm gone." He walked out into the rain. He had a car to catch. He had a promise to keep. 6 months later, the Atlantic Ocean didn't care about bloodlines. It didn't care about money, influence, or the sins of a father. It only cared about strength. On a grey, freezing morning, off the coast of Bar Harbor, Maine, Nico Vitti hauled a heavy crate of lobster traps onto the deck of the Sarah Jane. The salt spray stung his face, turning his skin raw and red. He wasn't wearing a bespoke Italian suit. He wore a thick, woolen sweater and oilskin trousers that smelled of diesel and brine. His hands, once manicured and used only to sign contracts or hold a gun, were now calloused, scarred, and permanently stained with grease. "Good haul, Nick," the captain, an old man named Elias, shouted over the roar of the wind. "Go on home. Storm's rolling in." Nico nodded. "Thanks, Elias." He walked up the gravel pier to a rusted Ford pickup truck. It was a far cry from the Audi R8 he had abandoned in a Jersey City parking garage half a year ago. But it ran, and it didn't draw attention. He drove inland, his eyes instinctively flicking to the rearview mirror every 30 seconds. The habit was a scar that wouldn't fade. He was Nick Valenti now, a quiet fisherman with no past, but in his nightmares he was still Nico Vitti, the hunted prince. The cabin was a small A-frame, tucked behind a wall of pine trees on a bluff overlooking the bay. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke and roasting chicken. Leo was at the kitchen table, typing furiously on a laptop. The wheelchair was gone, replaced by a cane he barely used. He looked healthier, the hollows in his cheeks filled out by home-cooked meals and a life without fear. "Hey," Leo said. "Weather looks bad out there." "It is," Nico replied, hanging up his coat. "Where is she?" "Garden. Trying to save the hydrangeas before the frost hits." Nico walked out the back door. Tessa was on her knees in the dirt, wrestling with a sheet of burlap. She looked up as the door creaked. Her grey eyes, once filled with terror, were clear and bright. "You're home early," she smiled. Nico reached down to help her up. Her hand in his was warm, grounding him. "I missed you," he said. The words simple and true. "We're safe here, Nico," she whispered, sensing the tension in his shoulders. "Someone always knows," he murmured. As if summoned by his paranoia, the sound of tires crunching on gravel cut through the wind. Nico froze. Tessa went rigid. A black sedan was coming up the long dirt driveway. It was sleek, polished, and terrifyingly out of place in the Maine wilderness. "Get inside," Nico ordered, his voice dropping to a command. "Get Leo. Go to the basement. Do not come out." "Nico, go!" Tessa ran inside. Nico didn't run. He walked to the woodshed, reached behind a stack of logs, and pulled out a Sig Sauer wrapped in oilcloth. He racked the slide and walked to the center of the driveway. The car stopped. The engine died. Nico raised the gun. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He wore a trench coat and held a leather briefcase. It was Samuel. "You found us," Nico said, not lowering the weapon. "It wasn't easy," Samuel said, raising his empty hands. "You disappeared well, boss." But I know how you think. I'm not your boss, Nico said. Give me one reason not to drop you right here. Because I brought you a housewarming present, Samuel said, placing the briefcase on the hood of the car. And news. What news? Your father is dead, Samuel said. The words hung in the cold air between them. Heart failure officially. The stress of the investigation was too much. Nico waited for grief. He felt nothing but a hollow release. And Cassian. Rikers Island. 3 consecutive life sentences, Samuel continued. The evidence you left at the restaurant buried him. The commission panicked and carved up the Vitti territory. The empire is gone, Nico. It's all dust. Samuel tapped the briefcase. In there are the deeds to this property, bought through a shell company, plus new passports and birth certificates for Nicholas, Tessa, and Leo Valenti. Clean slates. Nico stared at him. Why? Because you were the only one who didn't treat me like a dog, Samuel said, buttoning his coat against the wind, and because I wanted to see if it was possible for someone to actually get out. Samuel got back into the car. He rolled down the window one last time. Don't come back to New York, Nico. There's nothing there but ghosts. I won't, Nico promised. He watched the car reverse and disappear down the road. Only then did he safety the gun. When he turned around, Tessa was standing on the porch. She had seen everything. It's over, Nico said, his voice cracking. He's gone. They're all gone. Tessa walked down the steps. She stopped a foot away, studying his face. The wind burn, the scars, the eyes that no longer held the weight of a crime family. So who are you now? She asked softly. Without the war? Without the name? Nico looked at his rough, fisherman's hands. Then he looked at the woman who had saved him with a linen napkin and a glass of water. I'm the man who cooks dinner, he said. And tomorrow, I'm the man who fixes the roof. Tessa smiled, tears spilling over. I can live with that. She wrapped her arms around him, and Nico buried his face in her neck. That night, as the storm raged against the cabin, Nico sat by the fire with a glass of cheap wine. He looked at his reflection in the dark window pane. He didn't see a monster. He didn't see a prince. He just saw a man. The glass didn't shatter. It just reflected the peace he had burned down a city to find. And that is the story of the Gilded Cage. From the shattered glass of a Manhattan restaurant to the rocky shores of Maine, Nico and Tessa proved that sometimes the only way to win the war is to leave the battlefield. It's a story that asks a difficult question. Can we ever truly escape where we come from? Nico had to lose his empire, his family, and his identity to find the one thing money couldn't buy. Peace. What do you think? Did Nico deserve a second chance after everything he did? Or are some sins too great to be washed away by a quiet life? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories of romance, betrayal, and redemption, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.